So there's a few other unique props in the scene that I wanted to talk about, kind of how I approach them and things to keep in mind while you're moving forward on this stuff. For instance, if you're going to do a unique texture on something, you should really spend the time to make nice UVs for it. So if we look at how this is laid out, everything's nice and flattened. It's laid out pretty clearly, and things are working well. And this is good because this lets us be able to iterate quickly in Photoshop and not always have to use a 3D painting program like Substance or ZBrush or Mari or any of that sort of stuff. We can just use Photoshop as much as possible. Working on games the last few years has really introduced me to like working this way. It's just a lot faster, it's more efficient, and so the time that you spend setting up your UVs just pays dividends as you start texturing. So it's pretty common to take something and just throw some really quick automatic mapped UVs on it and then 3D paint it, but sometimes in the long run that actually can slow you down and actually be more of a hindrance. And I actually will talk about that in a little bit as well, of a case where that kind of bit me in the ass. But looking at this, that's kind of the main thing I'll say to you is definitely spend the time on your UVs and be smart about that. As far as also paying attention to how important the object is, how it's being used. This is something that we've been talking about a lot on this, right? Like being smart and efficient with your time usage. And so this is another example of that, where this Sega Genesis is actually just planar mapped from the top, just straight top down. We can actually take a look here at the diffuse texture of it. And it's really simple and basic, right? And this is just top down UV'd. And it really does exactly what we need it to do when seen in the actual shot, which is just down here. So there was no reason to really go in here and go crazy with that, but it was worth doing something unique for it, so it had the logo and stuff like that, because I wanted that to be recognizable. So again, that's just working efficiently. I want to talk real quickly about this crate, which this was something that kind of bit me in the ass a little bit. So this was textured with Dedo, but honestly it could have been textured anyway. So if we look at this material, it's really basic. It's basically just like a repeating kind of plastic, grungy plastic, with like the ambient occlusion multiplied on top of it. That's really all there is to it. There's a little bit of like edge wear, but it didn't, Dedo didn't do too well with the curvature map I gave it, so it didn't quite get the look I wanted anyways. So essentially that's what happened. But if we look at the UVs of this thing, you can see I just quickly unwrapped it, and so everything is actually, it's upside down. These pieces are upside down, and everything's kind of bowed and bent. And so when I actually came to have to put the logos on the front and side, because it's all bowed, I actually had to stop and then take this into a 3D paint program and do it as a projection paint, as opposed to just overlaying it in Photoshop, which would have been way faster and way easier. But because I kind of half-assed the UVs, it ended up taking a lot longer than it should have. So if we look at the way that the logos are on here, they're bent in a certain way to make it look straight. So this is an example of a time where you kind of want to slow down, think about what you're doing, and probably spend the time to actually UV this out. Spend the next, the extra 5 or 10 minutes to UV it out, so it saves you effort and time moving on. So the last thing I want to talk about, this is pretty much, to be totally honest, you guys, this is pretty much the only assets that are one-to-one textured in the whole scene. And this one's even like kind of only one-to-one textured. This is one of the boxes that's up in the front. And if we look at the UVs on this, it's just basically planar mapped on each side and lined up with the texture. So we're actually going to go a little bit deeper into how I created this. So let's take a look at that. So I want to talk about how I approach a little bit more of a custom texture. So for this, it's basically the box that we see in the foreground. I knew this box was going to be right up front, and I was going to do a bunch of kind of quick, easy boxes, cheap boxes with tileable textures, but I knew I kind of wanted one fancy pantsy one. So you'll see what I'm doing here is after I have my basic box textures kind of laid out already, I start to grab a bunch of damage. So this is all stuff that I found online, using the tricks, not really tricks, but using the search tools and that sort of stuff that we talked about before for finding reference. So instead of just finding modeling reference now, we're actually looking for texture reference. And so what I'm doing here is I'm grabbing the bits and bobs off of the textures that I found, and I'm kind of cleaning them up, softening the edges, and getting them all into Photoshop so I can quickly kind of duplicate them, color correct them, and get them in my texture. So some of them I'm not sure if they're going to work or not. So I'm just kind of trying a bunch of different stuff right now. What typically happens is I try a bunch of stuff, and then I find a few that I really like, and I'll just use those over and over again. But since I'm not really sure what's going to work yet or not, I'm just kind of grabbing everything. You notice I'm straightening things out ahead of time and fixing perspective and stuff like that, because this is going to be, a flat UV box. So it's just easier to work with when I have that stuff going. I actually found it pretty difficult to find good reference of damaged boxes. This is a pretty easy thing that you could go out and take photos of yourself. So I kind of figured if this wasn't going to work, I'd probably have to go out and do that. But I found enough little bits and bobs here that I think it ended up working okay. And you see they're all different resolutions and stuff right now. But the way that I'm going to mix them together, it shouldn't matter too much. So this is my base, clean box. And here's all my laid out pieces. So I'm going to start mixing them in. You'll see sometimes I'm overlaying, other times I'm multiplying, other times I'm just using normal and using the opacity to kind of mix it in. It really depends. But the main thing is I'm always trying to blend it color-wise in. So you'll see me constantly changing the color of it. That's usually the hue saturation, just trying to match all the colors together as I want them. Just cloning out the stuff I don't want. And just grabbing those pieces that I created and trying different. So I put one on the edge already, wasn't quite enough, so I'm going to try another one here. Again, just adjusting the color so it actually lines up. So again, most of that is hue saturation and just adjusting the actual values. And then always, like you can see here, always going in with the eraser tool and just fading things on and off as I need them. And once again, adjusting the color. The more you kind of adjust the color on these things, the better you get at it. As I said, from doing a lot of matte painting stuff, your eye gets pretty good at matching these colors. So this one's set to multiply, so I just kind of had to adjust it with levels and color balance and all that stuff, so it kind of looked how I wanted it to as it's set to multiply. So that's obviously setting the layer first, and then adjusting the colors after it's set to multiply, so I'm actually seeing what it's doing. And here we are, just adding more damage. A lot of this is, as you can see, scaling. So scaling things in and out, up and down, just trying to get the desired effect. If it's stretched or whatever, like, it's usually not a big deal as long as it looks okay. And here's just reusing the same piece, but just making sure to break up that texture. And I noticed the cardboard was looking a little boring, so I was just grabbing other pieces and overlaying them on top and setting them at really low opacities just to get more like textural stuff in the overall, not just the edges, but everything. So again, always going to the internet, right? Checking the internet for when I need something, grab on there. So something like this I thought would be really useful to really kind of, give it that weird look. And it's just set to overlay, pretty low opacity, and just fade it in and out. Water damage is important, obviously. This box is really supposed to look like it's been kind of used and abused, so Lots of damage. I also wanted, as I like to do, kind of throw in little homages here or there to things. So throwing in a Weyland-Yutani logo here, and just trying to make it look not so clean. So going in, liquefying, kind of breaking it up, so it looks like it was kind of like conforming a little bit, and then breaking up the edge with a rough brush, or even jumping on here online and actually using this as a mask to get some scratches and stuff in there. Something you could paint in pretty easily. And then when I do logo stuff, I usually like to steal other people's logos because I'm really bad at logo design. So I grabbed this GM one, had a cool look to it, but I just delete all the stuff off of it I didn't want. I was considering keeping the GM logo, but I couldn't quite get it to fit right. Keeping all this stuff on layers too, because I haven't actually put it on the box yet, so I'm not really sure what it's going to look like. So if I need to adjust where that logo is, having it on a separate layer is important. And then I knew that barcodes and QR codes were going to be a pretty big theme on a lot of the stuff I was doing. So I found some cool barcodes here, and just playing again with maybe multiplying it, maybe not. I'm just trying to figure out exactly how I wanted it to sit in here. And then making sure that there's actually stuff overlaid on top of it, so it doesn't look so clean. It's so perfectly black and white, and I'm trying to make everything look grungy, so I had to make sure to break it up. And here they were so perfectly laid out, it's important to grab them and rotate them around and really make them look like they're a little haphazard. Always going in and trying to adjust it, right? So it's you don't want it to look CG and perfect. Everything needs to be just a little wonky and messed up. And just adding more of these, classic box stuff here, right? Up, the arrow, more big barcodes and stains. Just looking around for stains, anything that looks good. I really like, this part of texturing. To me is really fun. It's like adding story and life to the texture. It's not just grabbing something and pasting it in there, which I do a lot, with a lot of these tileable things. A lot of that is kind of just thrown in and pasted on and used because it works. But, it's nice when I have an excuse to like go in and really go to town on this stuff. So here I have the flaps of the box as well. So I wanted to make sure that these are cool and have some good wear and tear on them as well. And you can see that it's just the slow process of building this stuff up, right? It's layer by layer. So, and just adding a layer, seeing if it needs something more, and then adding that thing that it needs. So there's one flap, gonna do another one. Want it to look slightly different. So just adding in this cool ripped texture on here, lowering the opacity, overlaying. I really like that kind of crinkled cardboard that I found, so I've been overlaying that on everything. And this grunge looks good as well. So once I've kind of processed something, a lot of times I'll just kind of duplicate it and move it around. So even here you can see I'm grabbing the barcodes here, but going kind of subtle with it, just one on each side. I don't need like the 8 like I did before. And saving it. So here it's important to actually remember that your texture and your model and your UVs all go hand in hand. So after I've kind of spent that amount of time on it, it's time to quickly UV a box and get it set up to see how it's actually working. So this is really easy. I just literally started with a cube and automatic mapped each face, and I just line up the UVs to the box I made. And this is something you're going to see happen over and over again with all these tileable textures and stuff. And here you can see I'm just throwing like a quick cardboard texture behind everything, so it's not so white, and if I miss an edge a little bit, it's not going to show up. So this is another piece that was really important. It was kind of the edge, the cardboard edge, and that's really easy because I can just grab all the edges of the cardboard and quickly UV map them, and then just map them all to that kind of serrated cardboard edge, and it just gives it a nice touch, and it's really, really easy to do. I basically do it on all the boxes. You can see me just lining them up and just squeezing it in there. It's really simple to do. Just hiding all those pieces I don't need anymore. And then making this concrete edge, or I keep saying concrete, sorry, this cardboard edge longer, just so I don't have to like break up the model more and it doesn't stretch too much. And I knew the inside is probably not really going to be seen, so that's just quickly mapped to one of the faces in there. Just blank. And here just extruding out the flaps that we created, and as you can see here, the edges as well, just keeping those easily UV'd and just applying that edge texture to everything. And then just mapping the flap and making sure that it lines up to the flap that I created up there already. Pretty simple. I'm just going to do that a few more times. I'm keeping the model really simple because I'm going to end up ZBrushing it later on. So I'm just looking basically for a good base to ZBrush. And, you know, trying to work smart, I cut the box in half, rotate it around, and just remerge it, so I don't have to re-UV everything and do all that stuff. Again, you got to work smart. We're never going to see more than two sides of the box, right? So it doesn't really matter that it's duplicated the same texture on either side. We can do a completely different texture on the other side if we wanted to, and get a lot of usage out of the box. But this is, you know, kind of how we're going to see it from a 3/4 view, usually. Removing these labels because as I've shown before, like I want to add the labels myself, so and this is, you know, I figured this is a good broad area right there that I'll probably map a lot of just kind of random box stuff to, so that's why I'm just cleaning that up a little bit there. So there you go, the inside has a little bit more happening. So that's basically it. That's the box. You know, the nice custom texture, I didn't have enough time to do that on every single prop, but this one I think it worked out pretty well. So to wrap it up, that's basically how I do all of the one-to-one textures in this scene. It's a mix between the really cool Dedo Quixel technique and just creating stuff from textures and reference found online in Photoshop and just overlaying that stuff. It's really powerful to obviously mix those two techniques together. And again, that's really this step's really for the important props that you want to show some story to, some life to, and some like just unique damage and wear and tear. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the tileable stuff we can do.